History is not always written by the victors. Sometimes it is written by the survivors. And in the frozen winter of 200 BCE, survival was far from certain. Here, near the fortress of Baideng, the man who had forged an empire, the dragon who had unified China, was caught in a trap. Emperor Gaozu, founder of the glorious Han Dynasty, was surrounded. For 7 days and 7 nights, with dwindling food, freezing temperatures that caused his soldiers' fingers to fall off from frostbite, and no hope of reinforcement, he and the core of his army stared death in the face. His enemy, 300,000 elite horsemen, the masters of the steppe, the warriors of the Xiongnu Confederation. The emperor, the son of heaven, was brought to his knees. He would survive, but only through humiliation. It was a wound that would cut so deep into the soul of his new empire that its scar would shape the destiny of a continent for centuries to come. How did it come to this? How could a newly unified China, with its vast armies, sophisticated technology, and immense population, be so utterly humbled by a nomadic people from the barren northern plains? The answer lies in the nature of these two colossal powers. One, a settled giant of agriculture and bureaucracy. The other, a storm of nomadic fury, born and bred in the saddle. Trapped and freezing, facing annihilation, Gaozu was forced to negotiate his way out. The official histories are discreet, but it appears a clever advisor named Chen Ping suggested a covert plan. Han artists were sent to secretly deliver a portrait of a beautiful Chinese maiden to Modu's favored wife, the Yanji, with a message implying that the Han would be forced to offer this peerless beauty to the Xiongnu to save their emperor. Fearing that the arrival of a new, beautiful rival would diminish her own status, the Yanji began to work on her husband. She argued that even if he conquered Han territory, the Xiongnu could never successfully occupy the foreign land, and that the Xiongnu risked losing everything for a temporary gain. Persuaded by his wife's counsel, and perhaps wary of a trap himself, Modu opened a corner of his encirclement. The battered Han army limped away. The emperor's life was spared, but his dynasty's honor was not. To understand how this young dynasty could be so powerful and yet so vulnerable, we must first look at the chaotic world from which it was born. Forging a dynasty, the rise of the Han. The Han Dynasty was forged in the crucible of civil war, rising from the ashes of the brutal but short-lived Qin Dynasty. Founded in 202 BCE by Liu Bang, a man of humble peasant origins who became known to history as Emperor Gaozu. It was an empire of immense potential, but also one born into a world of chaos. The memory of the Qin's tyranny was still fresh in the minds of the people. The infamous book burnings, the burying of scholars alive, the crushing legalism that treated human beings as mere cogs in a relentless state machine. The first Qin emperor had unified China, but he had done so with a hand of iron, and his dynasty collapsed in a storm of rebellion almost as soon as he died. From this chaos emerged two great contenders, the aristocratic and brilliant, but fatally arrogant, General Shang Yu, and the pragmatic, cunning, and far more personable Liu Bang. Their 4-year war, the Chu-Han contention, was a true clash of titans that bled China white. Xiang Yu was the greatest warrior of his age, a patrician who commanded immense personal loyalty and never lost a battle he personally commanded. But Liu Bang was the superior strategist and statesman. He knew how to delegate authority to brilliant generals like Han Xin, who masterminded his greatest victories. He knew how to win the hearts of the common people, promising a lighter hand than the Qin. and he knew how to patiently build a coalition, exploiting his rivals' arrogance and cruelty. While Xiongnu won battles through sheer force, Liu Bang won the war through endurance and political acumen. He emerged victorious, establishing his new dynasty not on the Qin model of pure terror, but on a more moderate path. He understood that an empire is built not just on walls and armies, but on the loyalty of its subjects. The power of this new dynasty lay in its people, tens of millions of farmers, artisans, and soldiers, and its revolutionary system of government. The Han established a sophisticated bureaucracy, staffed by educated officials who, in theory, were chosen for their merit. They created a unified legal code that was far less draconian than that of the Qin. A shared written language bound the diverse regions of the empire together. Their economy was the engine of the ancient world, powered by state-of-the-art iron foundries that mass-produced tools, plows, and weapons. Endless fields of millet in the north and rice in the south fed its colossal population. The new capital, Chang'an, was on its way to becoming the largest and most cosmopolitan city on Earth, a testament to the organizing genius of the Han state. And the ultimate expression of this organizational genius was its military. The Han could field massive armies of disciplined infantry, numbering in the hundreds of thousands. These soldiers were typically conscripted farmers, drilled into effective fighting formations and loyal to the emperor. They were armed with sturdy iron swords, dagger axes known as the Gei, and protective leather or iron lamellar armor. But their greatest weapon, a closely guarded state secret, was the crossbow. With a sophisticated bronze trigger mechanism and immense power, massed ranks of Han crossbowmen could unleash a devastating storm of bolts. It was the ancient equivalent of machine gun fire, a wall of death for any charging enemy. But this great, settled giant had a fatal weakness, a strategic Achilles heel. For all its power, the Han Dynasty lacked one crucial resource: high-quality horses. The central plains of China were agricultural lands, ill-suited for raising the vast herds needed for a powerful cavalry arm. And more importantly, it lacked warriors who could match the terrifying horsemen of the north. Empire of the Steppe, the rise of the Xiongnu. North of the Great Wall, or what passed for it at the time, a series of disconnected rammed earth barriers left over from previous dynasties, was another empire. It was not an empire of cities and farms, but of wind, grass, and horses. This was the domain of the Xiongnu. They were not a single people, but a powerful confederation of nomadic tribes, a river of different clans and languages flowing into one mighty torrent under a supreme leader, the Xiongnu. For centuries, they had been a persistent threat to the Chinese states, a scattered collection of raiders who would sweep down to plunder settlements and then vanish back into the steppe. But in the late 3rd century BCE, they found a leader who would forge them from a nuisance into an existential threat. His name was Modu Xiongnu. His rise to power, as recorded by the Han historian Sima Qian, was a chilling tale of absolute loyalty forged in blood. Modu's story is the stuff of legend, a tale of brutality and cunning that perfectly encapsulates the harsh world of steppe politics. He was the eldest son and heir of the ruling Qianyu, Tuman. However, his father favored a younger son by another wife and sought to get rid of Modu. His method was diabolical. He sent Modu as a hostage to a rival tribe, the powerful Yuezhi, and then promptly launched a surprise attack on them, expecting that they would execute the hostage prince in retaliation. But Modu was a survivor. He managed to steal a prized horse, kill his guards, and escape back to his own people. His father, surprised and perhaps impressed by his son's daring, had no choice but to reward him, giving him command of 10,000 horsemen. It was with these men that Modu forged his instrument of power. He created a special whistling arrow that shrieked as it flew through the air, and he gave his warriors a chilling command. Wherever the whistling arrow strikes, you must shoot, without question or hesitation. To test their loyalty, he first aimed the arrow at his own favorite horse, a magnificent steed. Any of his men who hesitated to kill the prized animal were immediately executed on the spot. Next, he aimed the whistling arrow at his favorite wife. Again, those who flinched, who could not bring themselves to shoot, were cut down. Finally, during a great hunt with his father, the Chanyu Tuman, Modu aimed his whistling arrow at his own father. His warriors, now conditioned to absolute, unthinking obedience, let their arrows fly. The Chanyu fell, pierced by 1,000 shafts. Modu, in a storm of blood, ambition, and patricide, seized control of the Xiongnu. Whether the legend is literally true or not, the result was undeniable. Modu Chanyu was a ruthless and brilliant leader who transformed his people. He immediately set about consolidating his power and expanding his empire. He first turned east and launched a surprise attack on the powerful Donghu tribes. When the Donghu demanded tribute, Modu pretended to acquiesce, giving them his best horses and even his own wife, lulling them into a false sense of security before launching a devastating attack that all but wiped them out. He then turned west and waged a relentless war against the Yuezhi, the very people he had been a hostage to. He crushed their armies and drove them from their ancestral lands in the Gansu region, forcing them on a great migration westward that would have ripple effects across Central Asia for decades. Modu subdued the tribes of the north in Siberia and the south near the Great Wall, creating a vast, unified nomadic empire that stretched from Manchuria to the Pamir Mountains. He established a sophisticated, hierarchical military structure. At its head was the Chanyu, his court a mobile capital of felt yurts. Below him were the wise kings of the left and right, who controlled the eastern and western halves of the empire. Below them were commanders of 10,000s, thousands, hundreds, and tens. It was a decimal system of command that allowed for rapid mobilization. The entire society was organized for perpetual warfare. The Xiongnu warrior was the most effective fighting man of his age. He lived his life on horseback, learning to ride before he could walk and viewing infantrymen with contempt. His weapon was the double-curved composite bow. Its secret lay in its complex construction, a laminated core of wood backed by tough animal sinew, which stretched on the draw, and faced with resilient horn, which compressed, storing and releasing a devastating amount of energy that could send an arrow through a shield. Firing from the saddle with deadly accuracy, a skill honed from hunting on the open plains, Xiongnu horsemen could rain down arrows on an enemy army, retreat before they could respond, and then strike again from another direction. They perfected the feigned retreat, a devastating tactic where they would pretend to flee, lure a disciplined enemy formation into a disorganized chase, and then turn and slaughter them. They required no ponderous supply lines, for their herds of sheep, goats, and spare horses were their supply train. They fought not for territory in the way the Han understood it, not for cities or farms, but for grazing lands, for access to trade goods, and for the sheer profit of plunder. It was this mobile empire of grass and horses that ambushed Emperor Gaozu at Baideng. Forced to confront an enemy they could not defeat on the battlefield, The Han would have to forge a new kind of weapon, one made not of iron, but of silk, wine, and princesses. A shameful peace, the Heqin policy. The Han court, in a desperate bid for survival, initiated a policy that would define the next 70 years of their history. It was called Heqin, the policy of peace and kinship. On the surface, it sounded like a respectable diplomatic solution. In reality, it was a system of institutionalized tribute and appeasement. The Han agreed to send a princess, technically from the imperial family, though often a lady-in-waiting in disguise, to be a bride for the Xiongnu. This political marriage was meant to create a familial bond, to make the two ruling houses one family. But the core of the agreement was economic. With the princess would go a vast annual dowry, a tribute by another name, of precious silk, wine, grain, and other luxury goods. The Han were, in effect, paying the Xiongnu not to attack them. For the women chosen for this fate, it was a life of exile. Decades later, a Han princess named Liu Shijun, sent to be the bride of a Central Asian king as part of this policy, would capture the profound sorrow of her existence in a poem. My people have married me in a far corner of the sky. A yurt is my chamber, felt is my walls, raw meat is my food, fermented milk my drink. My heart is wretched, and I long for my homeland. Oh, to be a yellow swan, returning to my old country. The policy sparked fierce debate at the Han court. The scholar Jia Yi submitted memorials to the emperor, warning that the policy was unsustainable and a moral failing, famously stating that to continue paying tribute was to hang the empire up by its feet. He argued that it normalized barbarian customs, drained the treasury, and eroded the authority of the Son of Heaven. But the memory of Baideng was too powerful. The pragmatists won the day, arguing that peace, even a purchased peace, was necessary for the Han Dynasty to recover from its civil wars and consolidate its rule. For 7 decades, this fragile, shameful peace held, but it was a peace punctuated by violence. The tribute never seemed to be enough. Xiongnu raids, sometimes small-scale, sometimes numbering in the tens of thousands, continued to plague the northern frontier. They would sweep down, burn villages, seize harvests, and carry off people and livestock before the slow-moving Han infantry armies could even be mobilized to respond. With every bale of silk sent north, the pressure built. A new generation was coming of age in the gilded palaces of Chang'an. A generation that had not known the terror of Baideng, only the lingering shame that followed. They were tired of bowing their heads. They were ready for war. And their leader, the man who would unleash the full fury of the Han dragon, was about to take the throne. The dragon's forge, Emperor Wu's war machine. In 141 BCE, a new emperor ascended the dragon throne. He was just 15 years old, but in his heart burned the cold fire of 70 years of accumulated humiliation. His name was Liu Che, but history would know him as Han Wudi, Emperor Wu, the martial emperor. For the first few years of his reign, he was constrained by his powerful grandmother, the Empress Dowager Dou, a staunch advocate of the Taoist principle of non-interference and a firm believer in the Heqin policy. Wu had to bide his time, consolidating his power and waiting. Upon her death in 135 BCE, the emperor was finally unleashed. He was a man of immense ambition, towering intellect, and absolute authority. A visionary who saw China that did not cower behind its walls, but dominated the lands beyond them. Emperor Wu saw the Heqin policy not as a strategy, but as a sickness. He saw the tribute flowing north as bloodletting, weakening the empire while strengthening its mortal enemy. He was a complex figure, a patron of the arts and Confucian scholarship on one hand, and a ruthless, almost obsessive, military autocrat on the other. He officially established Confucianism as the state orthodoxy, but he embraced a version of it that was far more proactive and expansionist than the original teachings, believing that the mandate of heaven was not a passive title, but an active command to expand the glory and security of the empire. He knew that to challenge the Xiongnu would require a total transformation of the Han state. To beat the wolf, the dragon had to become a wolf itself. His transformation of the empire began not on the battlefield, but in the treasury. War is fantastically expensive, and a war fought hundreds of miles away in a desolate wilderness is exponentially more so. Emperor Wu took unprecedented control of the economy, sidelining the powerful merchant class he distrusted. He established state monopolies on the two most profitable industries in the empire: salt, a daily necessity for every subject, and iron, the backbone of both agriculture and the military. The state now controlled their production and sale. The enormous profits, once in the hands of private entrepreneurs, now flowed directly into the emperor's war chest. He reformed the currency, creating new coins and cracking down on counterfeiting. He imposed new taxes on property, merchants, and carts. The entire economic engine of China, the greatest in the world, was being systematically retooled for a single end, all-consuming purpose: to fund the furnaces of war. But money alone could not win a war on the steppe. The emperor's greatest challenge and his greatest obsession was the very thing the Han lacked: horses. The Han heartland was agricultural, ill-suited for raising the vast herds of war horses needed for a cavalry army. Emperor Wu ordered the creation of enormous, government-run pastures and stud farms in the border regions of the north and west. His goal was not just to have a few cavalry units, but to be able to field armies of 50,000, even 100,000 horsemen, a force that could meet the Xiongnu in their own element and on their own terms. This desperate need for superior cavalry animals would launch one of the most incredible journeys of antiquity. Around 138 BCE, Emperor Wu dispatched a palace official named Zhang Qian on a top-secret diplomatic mission. His goal was to travel west, find the Yuezhi tribe, the ones who had been driven out by Modu Chanyu decades earlier, and form a military alliance with them, creating a second front against the Xiongnu. It was a perilous journey. Almost as soon as Zhang Qian and his small envoy of 100 men left Han territory, they were captured by the Xiongnu. He would spend the next 10 years as a prisoner. The Xiongnu treated him relatively well. He was given a wife and had a family, but he never forgot his mission. After a decade, he saw his chance and escaped. Instead of returning home, he continued west, following his emperor's original orders. He traveled across the vast deserts and high mountains of Central Asia, a journey of incredible hardship. He finally found the Yuezhi in Bactria, in modern-day Afghanistan. But they had grown comfortable in their new, fertile lands and had no desire to seek revenge on their old Xiongnu enemies. Though his primary mission was a failure, Zhang Qian's journey was a revelation. He saw new civilizations, great cities, and new products. Most importantly, he saw the magnificent, powerful heavenly horses of the Fergana Valley. Horses that he reported sweated blood and were far superior to anything in China. After another harrowing journey home, during which he was captured by the Xiongnu a second time and escaped again. Zhang Qian finally returned to Zhongnan in 125 BCE, 13 years after he had left. Only he and one other member of his original envoy had survived. He returned without an alliance, but with something far more valuable: priceless intelligence about the world to the west. His journey opened China's eyes to the possibilities of trade and conquest, and it was his report on the heavenly horses that fueled Emperor Wu's determination to push west. But all the gold and horses in the world were useless without men of talent and daring to lead them into battle. The first strikes Wei Qing and Huo Qubing. With the treasury filling and the quest for horses underway, the emperor needed commanders. He bypassed many of the established nobles and instead elevated men based on skill, not birthright. Two figures would rise to become legends. The first was Wei Qing. Born a servant, he was a commander beloved by his troops, known for his humility and for sharing their hardships. In battle, he was a strategic genius, cautious, methodical, and brilliant. The second was his nephew, Huo Qubing. Huo was the opposite, a military prodigy who became a high commander in his late teens. He was audacious, aggressive, and unpredictable. He pioneered a new kind of warfare for the Han, the deep cavalry raid. He was the Han's answer to the nomadic warrior. The first major move by Emperor Wu was not a defensive one. It was a trap. In 133 BCE, at a border market town called Mai, the Han laid a massive ambush. 300,000 Han soldiers were hidden in the surrounding valleys, waiting for the signal to converge and annihilate the Xiongnu leadership. But the Xiongnu was cautious. Sensing something was wrong, he discovered the plot and retreated. The great ambush was a failure. The pretense of peace was shattered forever. The war had begun in earnest. The first campaigns were led by Wei Qing. In 127 BCE, he led a successful campaign that reclaimed a strategic piece of territory south of the Yellow River. In 124 BCE, he led a massive force of 100,000, including 30,000 cavalry, on a deep raid, surprising and routing the forces of the Xiongnu's wise king of the right. These victories were important, but they weren't decisive. The Xiongnu remained a powerful threat. Then, in 121 BCE, the emperor unleashed his secret weapon, the 19-year-old Huo Qubing. His target was the Heqin corridor. What followed was a campaign of such speed and daring that it would cement Huo Qubing's legend. Leading 10,000 elite cavalrymen, he launched a lightning strike into the corridor. He didn't follow the established routes. He plunged deep into the wilderness, appearing where he was least expected. In just 6 days, he rode over 500 miles, smashing through 5 Xiongnu kingdoms. Just a few months later, he was sent out again, penetrating even deeper and winning another crushing victory near the sacred Heqin Mountains. In these two campaigns, the Han had not just conquered territory, they had killed or captured nearly 40,000 Xiongnu and seized over 1 million head of their livestock, a crippling economic blow. The Heqin corridor was now in Han hands. China now had a secure gateway to the west, a path that would soon blossom into the legendary Silk Road. With the Xiongnu's right arm severed, Emperor Wu now saw his chance for a final, decisive blow. A single, epic campaign aimed at the enemy's heart, deep in the desolate northern desert. The Northern Desert Storm, the Battle of Mobei. The Xiongnu lamented their defeat in a folk song. Having lost our Heqin Mountains, our livestock can no longer prosper. But the war was far from over. Emperor Wu, emboldened by his generals' victories, decided it was time to go for the kill. In 119 BCE, he planned his masterstroke, the Battle of Mobei, the battle in the northern desert. This was to be the ultimate decisive confrontation. He assembled two massive expeditionary forces, each consisting of 50,000 elite cavalry and supported by 100,000 infantry and logistics personnel. It was the largest and most ambitious military operation the Han had ever mounted. The plan was for the two armies, commanded by Wei Qing and Huo Qubing, to advance along separate routes deep into the Gobi Desert, find the Qianyu's main force, and destroy it. Wei Qing's army advanced over 600 miles north. There, he found the Qianyu's main army waiting. A massive battle ensued. Wei Qing used his heavy supply wagons, or wugong carts, forming them into a mobile fortress to protect his crossbowmen from the endless charges of the Xiongnu horsemen. He then sent his own cavalry wings to outflank the enemy. The battle raged all day until a sudden sandstorm plunged the battlefield into darkness. Seeing his opportunity in the chaos, Wei Qing ordered his main cavalry forces to charge, smashing into the weakened Xiongnu lines. The Qianyu's army broke. He himself barely escaped with a few hundred men. Meanwhile, Huo Qubing, advancing on a different route, annihilated the forces of the Xiongnu's other great leader, the wise king of the left. He pushed all the way to a place called Wolf Cub Mountain, deep in modern-day Mongolia. There, in a grand symbolic gesture of conquest, he conducted a ceremony to worship heaven. The Battle of Mobei was a staggering victory for the Han. The Xiongnu armies were shattered, with a combined loss of over 90,000 of their best warriors. This was a catastrophic blow, representing perhaps as much as a quarter of the entire northern Xiongnu fighting population. A single generation of warriors wiped from the face of the steppe. The ghost of Baideng had finally been vanquished, but the echoes of such a titanic struggle would shape the future for decades to come, bringing ruin to the vanquished and a staggering, unforeseen cost to a victor. The price of victory, aftermath, and the Silk Road. Victory in war is rarely as clean or as final as the storytellers would have it. For the Xiongnu, the defeat at Mobei was a catastrophe from which they would never fully recover, leading to a prolonged period of internal strife. The Han expertly exploited this weakness. Eventually, in the middle of the 1st century BCE, the Xiongnu formally split. The southern Xiongnu, led by Qianyu Huanye, submitted to the Han, becoming a vassal state. The northern Xiongnu remained defiant, but were hunted by the Han and their new allies. In 36 BCE, a Han army marched over 1,000 miles west to modern-day Kazakhstan to attack the stronghold of the last major northern Xiongnu, Jiji. In a dramatic battle, they breached his fortress, killed him, and sent his head back to Chang'an to be displayed on the city walls, a final, grisly message to all who would defy the Han. While the Xiongnu Empire crumbled, bringing a new era of security to the Han frontier, a quiet but devastating reckoning was taking place back home. Victory, it turned out, had a price. The decades of constant warfare had nearly bankrupted the state. The historian Sima Qian, writing during Emperor Wu's reign, gave a stark account of the cost. He stated directly, the coffers of the state were empty, the farmland was exhausted, and the common people were so destitute they ate human flesh. In his later years, Emperor Wu himself seemed to recognize the immense suffering his obsessions had caused. In 89 BCE, he issued an unprecedented public proclamation known as the Edict of Repentance. In it, he formally apologized to the nation, stating, Hereafter, all policies that are an affliction to our people must be stopped. My sole focus shall be on enriching the people." It was a stunning admission from the autocratic martial emperor, a recognition that a victory that destroys one's own country is no victory at all. So when the dust of these epic campaigns finally settled, what was left? What was the final, enduring legacy of this 200-year struggle? Legacy of the Han versus Xiongnu Wars. So what then is the final legacy of this epic 200-year struggle? It is a story of how a settled, agrarian empire learned to fight and defeat a nomadic one. The war also fundamentally shaped the identity of China itself. The struggle against the Xiongnu helped to solidify the concept of a unified us, the civilized Han of the Central Plains, versus of them, the nomadic barbarians of the steppe. The Great Wall, largely expanded and fortified during this period, became more than just a defensive line. It became a powerful symbol of this division. The Han-Xiongnu War was a clash of civilizations, a generational struggle that defined an era. It began with the humiliation of an emperor in a snowy wasteland and ended with his descendants' armies dictating terms deep in the enemy's heartland. It was a war of revenge that cost millions of lives and nearly bankrupted an empire. Yet, it also secured China's borders, gave birth to the Silk Road, and forged the military and political DNA of a dynasty that would be remembered as a golden age. It stands as a timeless and brutal lesson in the nature of empire, the true cost of security, and the long, bloody, and transformative shadow that is cast by war.